is called.
Okay. Your meeting is called to order. Devine, could you take roll?
Sure. Mr. Roy Montalban? Not here. Mary Heller Wickert? Here. Lee Einer?
Present.
Joe Whiteman?
Here,
Dr. Blair? She was excused?
She had a family emergency, and I believe she was excused.
Yes. And also present is myself, Raylene Lopez, and Chief Antonio Salazar.
Yes. Fantastic. Everybody's had an opportunity to look at the agenda?
Yep.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I have a question before we get to that.
Okay.
The question is who sets the agenda? I looked at the minutes from last time, and obviously I was present, and so I was a little bit surprised to see items numbered 6 and 7 on there. Well, the item 6, business items, the 3 positions and the Bulletproof vest, and item 7, the newly appointed commanders and the certificate of valor. The survey review is the only thing I remember. I'm not objecting to these items. I'm asking who sets the agenda and how did these get on here?
I agree that we, as a body, should define the process by which we get things on the agenda. We've certainly seen public bodies hand grenade over that issue in the past, and once it's well defined, it's just a matter of following the policy and the procedure.
Perhaps Dr. Whiteman has a comment.
I agree, it ought to be clear how stuff gets on the agenda.
Well, what we should do for today is, okay, number 1, we've asked questions like, how does this happen? And let's find out before our next meeting. Does anybody have any objection to the matters that are
No.
currently on the agenda, or at least the ones that I listed off? I do not. I do not have objections.
I don't have any objection either.
No, I don't.
And perhaps on the next agenda, we could place on the agenda the matter of how we place things on the agenda.
I
That
agree.
would not be a bad thought.
How things get on the agenda and how they get off the agenda.
Aha. That's an interesting question. But at this point, I'm still open to entertaining a motion to approve the agenda.
Sure, I'll so move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Vote?
Aye.
All who approve, say aye.
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 There we are. Okay. And we move on to the approval of minutes, as everybody.
I have another question about the agenda.
Okay.
Shouldn't the agenda include input from the police chief or his designee? Shouldn't that be a routine part of our agenda?
Well, I
That
think
we should be speaking to the,
items 6 and 7 would appear to be that.
but I mean, in general, as a routine thing, shouldn't we invite the police chief to be part of this committee or speak to us routinely? Should he have a point on the agenda?
I think as a generic, rather than itemizing like this,
Yeah.
police chief's report,
Something like that.
that could be done.
So are you talking about, like, before we actually sit down today and have the meeting, like to have maybe a meeting prior to this and I guess discuss what's on the agenda? Is that what you?
No, I was thinking that you should be routinely entered as an agenda item so that you're always there, or your designee is always there when we're meeting.
I see.
It seems reasonable to me.
I'm going to make a
Report.
suggestion, if I might, which is that we
We can think
place
about
the
this.
matter of the agenda on the agenda for
Yeah.
our next meeting, and we can hash these things out.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, it seems by our title of Police Advisory Commission, which is confusing, but it seems that we ought to have the police
Present.
chief or somebody here.
Or
To me-
designate, yeah,
Mhm.
So-
that's what I'm saying.
I guess kind of like the way, with the council meetings, the sergeant at arms, the police chief or the designee is always part of the, not the council, but, I guess, whatever in relation that is to, pretty much always there at the meetings. Is that kind of what we're talking about?
Something
Right,
like
but
that.
I'm saying because our title is Police Advisory Commission, that as a matter of just default or actuality, that somebody from the police department should be involved
yes.
at one level or another.
Correct, okay.
And so that it's not a surprise and we don't have to vote on this every time. Say, no, this is the section where the chief or his designee
Is here,
is present and maybe participates.
okay.
Okay. And again, I think we can put that as an agenda item on our next agenda, and we can hash out items related to the agenda. If I can draw us back to our current agenda, has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Well, I wasn't completely happy with the minutes because at the last minute meeting, I specifically asked the chief if he would be studying prospective police officer candidates if they're members of extremist organizations. That didn't make it onto the minutes, but I spoke to you about that last time.
Can you remind me about that? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I said, I'd like to be confident that when you get a new officer, you be sure that he's not a member of the Proud Boys or the Oath Defenders or any other kind of problematic extremist organization that we're going to have as our police officers here.
Yes, and, okay, yeah, we could discuss that. I know we did discuss that. I remember that conversation in our last meeting.
Mhm.
We discussed like the background checks, the extensive background checks
Yep.
within the police department. So anything that would be in relation to let's say those extremist groups, any crime that they're related to, or any crime that may have been a part of during, carrying out whatever activities for that extremist group, that would come up on their background. And our background at the police department is pretty extensive. I mean, they could take up to a week long and possibly even longer, just as things start coming up on their background. The investigator who's assigned to that background just dives a little deeper into that. So
History of domestic violence or whatever.
yes, all of that. would
All
come
that
up.
kind of stuff.
Yes.
So I was hoping that would end up in the minutes.
Okay.
And I can go ahead and
we
fix
add it
this.
to the minutes and perhaps have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Sure, I'm so
Could I have a
moved.
question,
Oh.
a little bit further discussion before we move and approve? I also remember that specifically, that Dr. Whiteman had asked if in your background check that you were screening applicants to screen out applicants who were in extremist organizations, and he specifically mentioned Proud Boys and Oath
Keepers.
Keepers or Defenders.
Yeah, whatever.
They're the Oath Keepers.
Okay, Oath Keepers. I thought that those were highly specific comments from Dr. Whiteman, and I think it would be good to mention those, and I also believe that your answer with elaboration was, yes, we are going to screen out extremists and do an extensive background check, including, I don't know, maybe now we're going to include domestic violence, but I don't remember that part. So anyway, my suggestion is that the minutes be clarified to add in that that Dr. Whiteman had asked that question, and specifically name those two extremist groups.
Okay. This is great. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes with the corrections we've just discussed?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Business items. Chief, you're up.
So, I plan on presenting the 3 narcotic positions. I think we might have spoke a little bit about that with the last meeting, but now it's actually starting to get the ball rolling on presenting it up my chain, city manager, council, and that is definitely a need for the city, and obviously the narcotics don't just come from within the city, it's from within the county as well. Just to speak a little bit on that, the narcotics positions and their roles, there would be 1 supervisor and 2 agents underneath the supervisor of the narcotic division. With that, we are in hopes to continue working with San Miguel County Sheriff's Office, the DA's office, reaching out to Mora County Sheriff's Office, and just work alongside specifically narcotics. And not only, so whenever we help them out in the county, not only are we helping them out in the county, we would be in turn helping out the city. And like I said, most of our narcotics don't come from just specifically within the city. A lot of times they come from out in the county. So there is a dire need for these three narcotic positions that, like I said, focused on narcotics. And with that, the more cases that we build, then we can argue about getting the Region 4 narcotics back to our city and county. The next one is bulletproof vests for patrol. These bulletproof vests are very different from our current bulletproof vests. These bulletproof vests will stop rifle rounds. The bulletproof vests that we currently have, and other agencies currently have throughout the state, some are actually going to these specific bulletproof vests. They're called Angel Armor, and so these ones will be carried outside the vest, or outside the, their uniform. So normally we have a bulletproof vest underneath our uniform. It's concealed. It's called a concealed vest. These ones would be outside on an outside carrier, and these would add, again, much more stopping power to rifles. And as we all know, the people that we deal with on not a regular basis, but every once in a while, we've had a few incidences where people have pulled AR-15s and shotguns out on police officers, and that's not only here. That's around everywhere. And our current vests won't stop those rounds. Any rifle round, not even a .22, they won't stop a .22 round from penetrating through the vest. So these vests will stop pretty much all of the rifle rounds that are out there. So that's way more added protection for the officers out on patrol. So yes.
Would those be on all the officers all the time, or just certain occasions when there's a problem?
All the time. So the reason for that, and it was explained to me by this company, is because it was first proposed as like maybe an active shooter vest. An active shooter vest typically it has like the real heavy plates with the metal plates, and those actually stop the rifle rounds. Those are like the ones that you see in the military carries. They have thick plates, metal plates that stop rifle rounds. The way this was explained, which makes sense, and you guys may disagree or agree, if for a traditional active shooter vest, that typically stays within the car or within within the trunk of the vehicle. Well, most of the time, almost really every time, the suspects of any crime or the suspects who have the intentions on shooting at police officers with the high-powered rifle, we're not really given any warning. We're going out there, we're going out away from our vehicles, so then we have to exchange in whatever gunfight or any, we just have to negotiate their high-powered rifle to try to get back to the vehicle and obtain, that outer carrier vest. So these vests are designed to be on all the time. So they'll no longer have the concealed carry vest, or the concealed vest. They'll have that on outside their uniform at all times. So they're not having to run back, while taking fire and trying to get back to their vehicle and grab their vest that will stop, 30-06 round rifle. So they would be on all the time.
Seems like a good idea.
Right.
Safety.
It would make you look a good deal more like a battle warrior than a policeman if you have on a vest like that, wouldn't it?
So the design that we're going with, so if you look at my uniform now, the design that we're going with for the outer carriers, they pretty much look like this. They have the pockets, they have the badge holders, they have the name tag, specific place for the name tag. So it's not so much as a, and I understand, the persona is like the military. We want to try to stay away from that. So that's why we were going with this specific outer carrier vest. Well, we would like to go to this outer carrier, is because it does look like a uniform. Like I said, it looks like this, and you can carry, different stuff on your, I guess, your belly line here, on your waistline, your belly line, to eliminate the weight that you're carrying around your hips. And the reason for that, we have 30-something-year-old officers, 20-something-year-old officers already having sciatic problems because of the weight bearing on their hips. So if we're able to at least maybe get a couple of pounds off of their hips with with their duty belt and stuff, maybe have a taser up higher on their, something that supports, like their shoulders support a lot more weight evenly, other than your hips bearing so much weight. So they don't look like a warrior or a military vest, I guess I can say.
So you're telling us this more as general information than, obviously it's nothing for us to approve or disapprove or anything like that. It's nice for us to know, but it's great for us to know, but it's not our role to take a position on what what kind of stuff you have, I think.
Right. And I guess I'm just letting you guys, be aware of what we're dealing with out in the public, and how we're looking to combat that, how we're looking to keep our officers safe. And like I was saying earlier, these are already, this item is already being moved up my chain and hoping for approval. So.
Hello.
I'm sitting on Google.
As a virtual meeting. Anyway, all right, well, I think it's time that I cede the chair to Mr. Montfort.
Thank you.
We should tell him where we are on
Yeah,
the
we're on.
agenda.
We're down to discussion items.
Okay.
We just had a presentation or an announcement from the chief about the 3 narcotics positions for the drug crime and for our agency, which has been, we all know, has been chronically understaffed. And then he also told us a little bit about the new, more advanced, more effective bulletproof vests.
Okay, good. So we're on to discussion items. Do we want to talk about, hang on one second. Did we already do the public input?
No.
We have not done the public.
Okay, so we'll go back to that. Okay, so newly appointed commanders.
Yes, newly appointed commanders are Elias Rael, which is the commander of field operations, which is our patrol division, and our other commander of investigations is Matias Apodaca, which is of investigations in our street crimes unit. And in turn, he would also be overseeing our narcotics division as well.
Okay, so those are the new appointed commanders. And did you talk about your entire slate of commanders?
Say that again?
Your entire slate of commanders?
Our entire slate?
Yeah.
Those are the only two commanders. We only have two commanders.
Okay, okay. And can you say anything about both of these new commanders?
Yes, so I guess the reason why, these two were appointed specifically for their positions. On Commander Apodaca, he has over 20 years with the department. Most of those years were, well, a good bunch of those years were in investigations and in narcotics. So he is actually one of the, I will go out on the limb here and say he is the most experienced in our department whenever it comes to investigations in narcotics.
Okay.
So that's the reason why he is overseeing narcotics and investigations. And Elias Rael, commander of field operations, he's well respected in the department. He has a vast knowledge in patrol and in investigations. So it's not only just, he has an idea on just one aspect of the department. He has a lot of experience dealing with our citizens and a lot of ideas on how to improve our patrol division. So those are the reasons why, those are selected.
Okay, good. Does anyone have any questions or?
No?
All right. All right, that sounds good. So if there's no questions about the new commanders, then you have on here a certificate of valor to police officers.
So in our last, a couple council meetings back, we gave Officer Fasanella, Elia Fasanella, and Investigator Dennis Lujan 2 certificates of valor and the actual medals of valor for their bravery when a male subject came out of his home and was waiting for the officers and fired at the 2 officers with a high-powered rifle. Gunfire was exchanged between the 3, and ultimately that male suspect took his own life. But the officers are safe. They're okay. They're back on duty, and that was their certificate of valor for that.
Okay, good. And that was originally a domestic violence call, correct? So that was originally a domestic violence call?
No, that was a call just for police assistance.
Hmm.
And that's how the call came out. Just that male suspect wanted police assistance. He needed police help. That's the way it came across on the radio.
Oh, I see.
Fortunately for these 2 officers, they went to the wrong house across the street, and they were far enough away to where they weren't in close distance of that, of the high-powered rifle that he fired at them.
So the original call was from the actual individual
From the
with the
suspect, yes.
rifle? Okay, so it was actually an ambush then?
One could say that, yes, sir.
Okay, interesting. Well, great. I mean, I think your officers definitely deserve this award.
Yeah.
And we appreciate their work and their valor. So,
Thank you.
Obviously being shot at with a high-powered rifle is not,
And then, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, obviously being shot at with a high-powered rifle is not, a good way to, start your day. So,
Right, yeah.
no, this is fantastic. Appreciate that.
And just to speak a little bit more about that, the family of that male subject was very empathetic for the officers. they're actually, I mean, they've experienced the loss as well, so, our hearts go out to them. I mean, regardless of what the situation was, they still experienced the loss within their family, but they were very concerned for the officers, and, for that, not only do the officers appreciate, the concern for the families from, the actual suspect's family. I mean, we are all kind of, I guess we're all appreciative of them as well, to actually be so concerned of our officers during that time.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to answer this question if it's private, but was this a mental health issue, do you think?
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know.
Okay. I only ask that because it kind of goes to a part of the discussion we had last meeting
Yeah.
about ancillary mental health services that the police can refer people to
Right.
who need that help. So sometimes people act out, It's unfortunate that it ended the way it ended.
Yes,
But I'm
sir.
glad that our officers didn't get, shot, so.
Yes, and there is an unfortunate expression, but there's a reality to it. It's called suicide by cop, and you may pick that fight intending to lose it.
For sure.
Right.
In which case, somebody with a badge and a gun may not be the front man for that exchange if you expect that dynamic may be there. It may be somebody who is very skilled in de-escalation. A social worker, a psychologist. This is not on the agenda. Maybe we should talk about it another time.
Well, I mean, I think, we can talk about it another time, but I think these are all issues worth thinking about and discussing at some point. Because
I would
obviously-
like to say.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Chief, I personally feel like that there's no way the city of Las Vegas and its citizens can express our appreciation to officers who do this dangerous job for us. And I'm so glad to be, recognizing officers' valor. I think it's really important that we honor and appreciate our police officers as a community in any way we possibly can. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, I agree, because I think that, oftentimes people have complaints about the police, but it's not often that they get recognized for the actual work they do. And by actual work, I mean the risks that are taken on our behalf. So, yeah, definitely much appreciation to the department and to these two officers.
Thank you.
And their families too, because it's a risk for their families, so. Okay. Now, one last question on the two police officers. I know that they were awarded, given this award, is there going to be a long-term public recognition? I mean, that goes along with the award,
I guess like an annually thing?
Yeah, like special police officers. I mean, do we, that type of thing that maybe once a year we can look back and say that,
Yeah, that could happen, and also, I think more of these, hopefully, these medals aren't given out for that specific reason.
Right.
But hopefully, because these medals can be, I guess, can be given for any acts of bravery. And like I said, hopefully we don't have to address that issue and hand out, a medal of valor for that again. But yeah, I feel like there'll be more. The officers that we have, and they just need to be more publicized on the things that they do, and they commit acts of bravery all the time. But so we're gonna continue that.
okay, good. Yeah, and also condolences to the family of the victim. So, okay, so we have, we're going to talk a little bit about the survey, and then we have a few other things, a couple of other things we need to discuss that are partly a part of public input. But on the survey, I did review the city council videotape from the 18th of August, And there was a little bit of discussion about the police commission, and the survey did come up, and basically what's happening, which we will discuss in a second, is that Councilor Romero and our city attorney did take the time to start to work on the ordinance that we requested at a city council meeting a few months ago. So that is in progress. There is a draft from Scott Aarons, and there's also a draft from Councilman Romero, and I know that the chief and the other councilors also supported this effort, which we appreciate, because this is, you know, a long time coming, and it'll help us define what we actually are supposed to be doing and how that's supposed to happen. So one of the items that was addressed in the city council discussion, and it was not a long discussion, it was only like, you know, a short period of time, but the survey did come up. So I just wanted to mention, both for this body as well as for anybody who may be watching, that as everybody knows, we have been working on a survey, a community survey about policing. And the intent of the survey was to, so that the police department get feedback on how they're perceived by the public. And of course, that's not exclusive. In other words, that information would be provided to the governing body and the mayor, et cetera. But some of the discussion was about some of the details of the survey. And the governing body is requesting that before any survey is actually put out, that we actually finalize the questions on our part, submit it to the city council for review and approval before we actually do the survey. So I think that I just want to mention that, because in order to do that, it's going to take more time. In other words, at one point during the transition between chiefs, we were thinking of getting the survey out fairly quickly. So that will be delayed in order to comply with the requested process. Yes, Mr.
Chairman, not a problem.
Yes.
A couple of questions.
Yes.
Or maybe a question and observation. The requirement that any survey be vetted by the governing body before we move forward was in City Attorney Aaron's draft,
Right.
but was not acted on by the governing body.
No, it has
So-
not been yet, but I know that it also came up in verbal discussion. That's why I mentioned it.
Okay. Are you in possession of both drafts?
Yes, I am, although I should say that they were not actually, I did not receive them directly from the city clerk, because I know that in the meeting it's also mentioned twice that both drafts would actually be sent to this body. And I don't know if anybody else got it, or if you...
Nobody's received it. And
Okay, so,
Well, I'm confused. Are you talking about both drafts of the survey?
no.
No.
Okay, of the proposed ordinance?
Yes, because
Okay,
the
well, we
ordinance
seem to be,
mentions... No, I'm talking
have
about
two
the
things
ordinance.
going
I'm
on
talking about
here.
the discussion, the verbal
Okay.
discussion in the city council meeting. He mentioned that the survey is mentioned in the draft ordinance. The only reason I bring it up is that we're not going to launch it tomorrow. It's going to be months before it's launched. So I just want to make that clear to anybody who might be watching.
all right.
There's a delay, and that delay
you're
will
saying
be...
there was an action taken by the city council?
No, I'm saying we can't launch it until the action is taken.
Okay.
I'm not actually so sure about that. So let me go
Okay,
to
go ahead.
we have the survey that we've been working on, and then somehow during the transition, because I had asked for a copy of it, some of the paperwork has gone missing. I have one piece of paperwork, and while we were waiting for the to start up, I commented that I would be happy to take a look at this and edit it and make it more succinct, in particular on the number of crimes, so we could group them in groups. We don't want people to get discouraged.
Right.
So that's where we are, and I think we all know that for various reasons that the survey is not going out as we had planned on September 19th. One is it's not done and some of the drafts are missing. And number two, we have this issue with exactly what is the task of this commission, the police advisory
Right,
commission.
although let's not conflict those two right
Right,
now.
that's what I was
Just talk
talking
the
about.
survey.
So,
Right, right.
so this is where we are on the survey. We all know that's not coming out for various reasons.
Right.
And then the second thing is on the two drafts, we have the existing
Well,
document.
wait a second. Anybody who's watching is not going to know what you're talking about.
Okay.
We're talking about two drafts of an ordinance written by our city attorney, by Councilor Romero, regarding what the duties of this body are and how they are to be conducted. And I'm saying that for public knowledge.
Okay, I thought that's
So
what
when
I
we're
was
talking
talking
about the
about.
drafts, nobody's going to know what we're talking about.
And-
So the city has started to take action, which we have requested months ago, and we're very happy that they're taking this action, and I appreciate the effort on the part of Councilor Romero and our city attorney. But the drafts, and we can talk about this in just a second, but the two drafts are a little bit different, but the fact is that they are starting to define, the city council is starting to define what the duties of this body are, what our roles are, and how we need to conduct ourselves in relationship to the governing body, okay? Part of that discussion did have to do with the survey, which is why I brought this up.
Right.
But I want to talk about the survey first. So bottom line is the survey is not going to come out for a while. That's the bottom line. Because we said 2 months ago we're going to launch it a month ago, and then we're going to launch it before. We're not launching it yet. So now, to talk about the two draft ordinances, then we can dig into the details. So we have two copies of slightly different versions of a draft ordinance. And I should mention for public knowledge that this is an ordinance that is required by the city charter, but we've never actually had it, which means that our role as a police commission has always been kind of vague and undefined. So the good thing is that the city is now working to clarify what our roles are and what our procedures should be. So with that, I know that you had some thoughts, and then I had some thoughts, and I'm sure others do too. So why don't you go ahead?
Well, my first thought is that the members of this commission need to be provided with both drafts.
Right.
And I don't know why it's actually been delayed as long as it has. I would think that the commission would be looped into this.
Well, I think that was the intention. So, you know, I mean, I haven't talked to the city council yet, or the city clerk, but we didn't, just so everybody knows, we didn't actually receive it, even though in that meeting on the August 18th, they said that they would send it to this body, meaning all of us, including the two of you. So we have not received it.
But you're in possession of them,
Yes, I am.
but we haven't received it.
They were not sent to us. We had to dig around.
Okay. But you are in possession of it.
Right, but it was not sent to us. That's a different thing.
Simply through, okay, because you're not sharing this information because it was not obtained through the city clerk.
I'm not sure what your question is. They said they were going to send this to the police commission. We're all in the police commission. None of us have received either copy.
But you're in possession.
Yes, I
of
am.
both copies.
Right, it's called digging around for information because I'm curious.
Okay.
And the meeting was August 18th, which was a month ago, and we still haven't seen it.
But
So-
these are public documents at this point.
As far as I know, yes, because they were written and presented at the city council meeting, which is a public meeting, and they were referred to in British Bob.
Right. Would you object to providing them to the rest of the commission?
No, unless there's some reason that I shouldn't, but no, I have no problem doing that. I didn't do it for that very reason. Okay. So, good question, though.
I'm familiar with both drafts also,
Uh-huh.
and I would characterize them as having more than minor differences.
Yes.
The city attorney's draft, in my opinion, really would tend to be far less empowering for the commission
Mhm.
and would tend to leave us dead in the water in some respects.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not
that's-
actually fully persuaded that the requirement that we review all complaints would be satisfied under the city attorney's draft.
Well, again, just remember, this is being videotaped, and people who don't know what we're talking about are watching. So let's go back and talk about these two drafts, which need to be distributed to this entire body, including the chief and to Raylene. A couple of the items, when I read through, particularly the city attorney's draft, and again, these are drafts, they have not yet been approved by the city council, nothing's been voted on yet. They're presented for discussion at this council meeting on August 18th. There's a few things that I noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed other things, and everybody else has it, as well. But first of all, it specifies that we would review police complaints, meaning complaints against police officers or the department. And then in the city attorney's version, following any IA investigations, all other investigations, then we would review the situation and make recommendations for policy changes to the city council. And then they would consider those policy changes and vote on them. So one problem I see with that is, as far as I know, our police department is an accredited agency that follows police policy and procedures that are not just created here in Las Vegas, but are actually a multi-departmental kind of agreement. So theoretically, and this is something that the city, Scott Ahrens will have to look into, but theoretically, if there was any kind of a situation, and 2 years after an IA investigation and 2 years after blah, 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 we look at it, the problem is that if we made a recommendation for a policy change and the city council considered it and voted on it, I don't think that that policy change would be valid, because theoretically it would actually, it might threaten the accreditation of our police department, because we're following established police policies and procedures, unless it was something extremely minor, like our cops on scooters need to obey the speed limit. Okay, that would not be covered under these official policies and procedures, but if it were something like that, again, that would not be like a major kind of investigation of the department, right? That would be, somebody would be complaining about something, a cop on a scooter was speeding or something, which is valid, but again, it doesn't pertain to any kind of a major investigation that might require a discussion about actual police policies and procedures, okay? So I don't know if that would even be a valid process for us.
Here's the thing. There's actually two possibilities when there's a complaint and the conclusion is, wow, this was not a good outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one possibility is that policy and procedure were not adequate. That would merit discussion of policy and procedure with the governing body or the city council. But the other possibility, and they need to get feedback on this too, is policy and procedure are absolutely adequate here, they weren't followed, right? And the way the city attorney's draft was written, that portion of the conversation is completely omitted. We're allowed to comment on rules and procedures exclusively.
Right. Which, as I said, I don't think would be valid anyway.
Well, it can be. It needs to happen within a number of constraints, including the FOP contract, which we haven't mentioned yet, right? But we're not General Zod. We're not dictating changes that we don't understand. We're advising the governing body on what they might want to consider. I hope that is vetted legally before implementation as well.
Right. Now, I'm just commenting on the language that was actually used that referred to making recommendations to change policy and procedure, which we're not empowered to do anyway. And secondly, I don't think it would be valid for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Now, as far as policy not being followed and was a bad outcome, obviously the other issue that may be something worth thinking about, and again, this is something the city attorney needs to look into, is that if, let's say that there was policy and procedure not followed and it resulted in a bad outcome, and there was an internal investigation, that internal investigation is actually a private investigation. We are not privy to those details, partly because it's partly an HR matter and partly because it's a private internal investigation. Now, after it's concluded, like say a year and a half later, there will be an outcome, and the internal investigation itself, the police department would have findings, right? And at that point, that might be shared with the public, it might not, but in any case, the governing body would already be privy to those findings. So for us to review the internal investigation findings and make recommendations on them, I think would also be kind of problematic, because we're not trained police officers, we're not trained in policy and procedure, and for us to make recommendations following an IA investigation, actually, this is just my opinion, I'm not speaking for this body, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I think that that's something that should be considered, and before the governing body votes on this. And then I'll just make one more comment, and then I'm sure everybody has other comments as well. One other comment that I wanted to make is more general, and that is that it was not mentioned in either draft. I think an extremely important role that this body has, and I've mentioned this before, actually before you were chief, so you might not have heard this from me, but I've said it several times, and that is that a very important role that we play is the role of a community liaison. And that role is definitely a key part of community policing. And if we agree in this city that community policing is something that we value and that we're aiming for, that role entails not complaints against specific officers or against the police department in general. It entails people filing police reports, and sometimes people are afraid to walk into the police department, we've discussed this before, and actually file a report with a bunch of cops and give some kind of information. Some people are just intimidated by cops, some people might have had a bad experience in the past, some people are busy, they don't want to get involved, and other people, just for whatever reason, do not file police reports. And the problem with that, and the reason it's so important to community policing, is that if, let's say, somebody is victimized by a crime, or they're not quite victimized yet, but some people came to their door and they're kind of suspicious and they suspect that they might be casing their home or the neighborhood, and they don't report it, and then 2 doors down, somebody else's house gets cased and they don't report it, and then a block down, somebody's house gets cased and they don't report it, what happens is that a burglary will occur and the police will not have a suspect, because nobody reported these characters, what they look like. This guy was tall, short, whatever. They don't have a suspect. If those 3 police reports have been filed, even though they're just suspicious activity, all of a sudden you would have persons of interest and somebody to investigate. So without that, it actually definitely impacts the ability of our law enforcement agency to enforce the law. So I think, and again, I've worked with a lot of people, and again, for the benefit of anybody watching, including our governing body and the mayor, I've actually been working with this police department for well over 10 years, going back to when Gary Gold was, the chief. Christian Montano, Juan Montano, everybody up until, our current point. So what I've noticed is that because we exist at all, a lot of times people will come to me with whatever, right? I was assaulted, or a woman might say, I'm afraid that I'm going to get raped, or I know of a rapist, or something like that. And they're terrified to just go up to a police officer and file a police report. They won't do it. And some of these people are retired college professors. I mean, it's kind of shocking. I mean, and so I've asked people, why, I'd say, did you fill out a police report? And they said, no. And I said, why not? And the usual answer is, well, I don't want to get involved, or, I saw something, but I don't want to get involved, or I don't want to deal with the police. Okay, so, but I think that the ability to have a dialogue and open interaction between the police and the citizens is a really major component of community policing, because without that, it's hard to build up that trust. The more our citizens know our police department, our individual cops, and they know the chief and our command staff and the GC, et cetera, the better. And the more that our cops know the people in this town, the better. Okay? So that was not mentioned. That liaison role was not mentioned in either document, but I think it's a key role, and I think in reality it'll happen far more often than us reviewing an IA investigation. I mean, that role is common, and it's daily, and it's important. So I just wanted to bring that up, again, because we're not in a city council meeting, but I'm hoping that the members of the council and the mayor watch this, because that's part of my feedback. That needs to be addressed in this ordinance, that is an actual official role, because I think it's a very valuable one. And I know from my own experience, in dozens of cases, people will come up to me in Walmart or at the Skillet or somewhere and say, hey, I saw this happen. I saw some guy get beat up, yesterday or last night. And did you report it? No. Why? I'm not walking in the police department. So, but it's important. It's very, very important. So I would like that thought to be addressed in the ordinance. So outside of that specific recommendation, other thoughts? I didn't even ask you if you've seen any of these draft ordinances yet. Have you actually?
I saw Scott on it, Aaron.
Okay. Okay. So go ahead. Both. I think you might have comments.
I saw the proposal, the proposed ordinance that was presented for discussion at the city council meeting on August 18th. I was not able to get Councilman Romero's draft. I had requested it, and I didn't get any draft from that. I found something eventually that's unofficially, and that I don't know that it was actually Councilman Romero's or not. I've tried to contact him, but just today, so he hasn't really had an opportunity. But I noticed in the meeting, the August 18th meeting, that there was about an 8-minute discussion from hours 2:27 to 2 hours and 27 minutes to 2 hours and 35 minutes, that at the end of it, Councilman Romero had said that he had referred to the draft that he made for the Police Advisory Committee and said that both of these drafts were going to be sent to this commission and to the, I think he said, the police union. So my question, Chief, is do you have copies of these two drafts? The one from the city attorney and the one from Councilman Romero?
No.
No, your answer is no.
No, sorry, no.
Well, I'm just clarifying that that's what I heard you say.
Yes, yeah, I
So-
haven't.
So my concern is if we have drafts and a month ago they were supposed to be sent to us, where are they? Who's supposed to send them to us? And yes, we would like to have input, because it stands now, we have the existing commission rules under the ordinance, which is, well, it doesn't say very much. It says we advise the city council. And then we have the city attorneys, which is much more involved. It has several more layers of administrative procedure. And then we have this third one that apparently, and I'm saying apparently because I haven't heard from Councilman Romero, and I would like to. I don't know if he knows that we don't have it yet. So I think that's important, but it also says something about the procedure. If you're going to discuss it and you have people who are on the commission, then probably it's a good idea to give the commission the proposed drafts.
Yeah, I think that was the intention, but somehow we didn't get it, so, you know.
So here we are at a meeting with the old ordinance, the new proposed ordinance, and the possible proposed third ordinance.
So
Yes.
I will IPRA the city clerk for drafts of both ordinances, so we will have in our own hands evidence that is in the possession of the city, and it has come to us through official channels. It's sad that I have to, honestly. I also wanted to add, you know, we are not,
Excuse me, maybe we could just ask them first before having to go through through the IFRA. That seems like a lot of work.
it's
Just a-
actually not.
Okay, just a
It's-
suggestion.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
if you
just the
want-
format of the request is the only thing that's different.
Okay.
The other thing is, we're not inventing the wheel here. The city of Seattle, several years ago, undertook to develop community oversight of their police department. And having a huge budget and quite a few minds available, they did a comprehensive survey of the practices of community oversight boards and commissions for police departments. And actually, what's being contemplated in Romero's ordinance is a very low level of scrutiny. The high level of scrutiny would be, for example, what Albuquerque does, where we would have a paid investigator. But some of the things that you may believe are off the table, I don't think are. And I would like to provide a copy of the City of Seattle's research and analysis, so that we can all look at that and get an idea of what the possibilities are.
Yeah, no, that would be great. And I appreciate that you're always doing like huge amounts of research. It's fantastic, actually. So, yeah, no, I think that, yeah, I mean, we could look at what other cities are doing. Obviously, we're not a big city like Seattle. We don't have the same kinds of issues that Seattle has, but still, you're right. I mean, we're not, you know, it's not like we need to recreate the wheel from scratch. I think the other thing I should mention, since you brought up the you know, the DOJ issue in Albuquerque, that, you know, the level of scrutiny that the Albuquerque PD is getting is dictated by the Department of Justice for a variety of reasons. Obviously, that same situation does not exist here, but I think that I also, you know, regardless of what is finally voted on and approved with additional research by the city council, I just don't want to lose that community liaison piece. I just noticed it was not mentioned in either draft.
You don't want to lose what?
The community liaison piece, which I think is hugely important for community policing and police community relations. And also, in other words, I just want to make sure that this is like a balanced ordinance that takes into account that liaison role happens continuously and often, unlike an IA investigation, right? So, and I think it's really key. So, if that is added, and we review other cities' ordinances and maybe suggest something back that actually is feasible and legal, again, regarding the recommendations on changing police policy and procedures, then we'll see what happens. Now, it was also mentioned twice, I think Councilman Romero mentioned it at least once, and I think Scott Aaron's mentioned it, that, I mean, the comment that was made is, we don't know what's going to happen with the charter, but it makes sense to take a stab at this ordinance regardless. So maybe, you know, Lee, could you talk a little bit about what is happening with the charter and why that comment would come up in this meeting about our ordinance?
Okay, so,
Without getting into...
as well,
too
you
much.
know, I was also a commissioner on the Charter Commission.
Right.
There was absolutely no recommendation of change to section, I believe it's 6.02,
Which is your...
which is the portion of the city charter that creates the Police Advisory Commission, and with a broad brush paints its responsibilities, which are to review complaints and advise the city council. And, you know, that thing we all hate in our job description that says miscellaneous other duties is, right? But it also requires that the city council define the powers and duties of this commission through ordinance. And you've made reference to an existing ordinance, is it an ordinance in fact, and we're not just talking about the city charter?
Well, I have the Police Advisory Commission bylaws and rules of procedure.
Those are, okay, those are bylaws that were generated, I believe, by us?
Well, it says the Police Advisory Commission is created by the City of Las Vegas governing body. The mission is that the function of the commission shall be to serve at the pleasure of the governing body and shall assume whatever specific tasks are assigned to the commission by the governing body. In order that the function, duties, and responsibility are carried out in an orderly and consistent fashion with full public knowledge of the procedures, the following bylaws and rules of procedure are adopted, and it's
Okay.
procedure. So that's, we serve the city council. That's the one that there is now on the website.
Okay.
And then we have the one that was presented that says that.
But this is not an ordinance, correct?
Well, I think it's part of the city charter now, isn't it?
No.
Well, then I
Part
don't
of
know
the
what it
city
is.
charter.
Well, I got this off the city website.
Okay, and it's bylaws, which are, I can't say in this case because I'm not familiar with the document, but bylaws are typically generated by the body that operates with them. Not
City council?
I don't think the city council drafted this. They may have, but it doesn't.
That's
It
my-
doesn't
that's my-
satisfy the charter's requirement that they define our duties and powers via ordinance.
This is what I understood was the basis for having the Police Advisory Commission right now.
Although those may be an older
And
draft.
if I could suggest, I think that we're having this discussion, and we need to have this discussion that we're having with the city council.
Right.
And
I agree.
the city attorney, because we have this and these other two other
Plus
proposals.
the charter itself, right.
Right, so it's confusing.
Yeah, so for anyone who's watching, we're still defining our role. Our role
Somebody's
is not-
defining our role.
It's still not completely set, it's still ambiguous, so that's what we're trying to get to.
And the irony is, or the difficulty is that we're not empowered to define our own role.
That's correct.
We're
The
actually
city-
waiting
yeah,
on
the
another
city
body
council.
to do that for us so that
Right.
we can.
Yeah, and I appreciate
move forward.
I appreciate that they are taking steps to work on this, because it's been a while, and I think Councilor Romero has really led that effort, and I know that the mayor also supports the effort, so, yeah, so I think that, okay, so it seems like good next steps would be to officially receive the two official versions of these two drafts that were discussed at the city council meeting on August 18th. We need to review those, and I think that our input on those two ordinance drafts should be in writing, so that everybody in the council and the mayor can look at it and see it, and the city attorney can look at it and see it. They will probably need to do a little bit of discussion and talking on their side, and then I think it would make sense to do what Mary Helen just suggested, which is actually to appear at a city council meeting and discuss this in real time, after all these documents are laid out and everybody has seen them and understands what's what. Because I think that'll help the city attorney and the governing body get to a resolution more quickly. And again, if someone like me, if I've got a concern about something that appears to be missing altogether, that's the opportunity to bring it up. And if it's in writing, then everybody can talk about it, discuss it, debate it. So I think that this, resolving our role and our duties and our procedures, just based on what we were just talking about, is going to take probably at least another couple of months. So again, just for the public, I just want to say that this police commission body, our roles have not been fully defined yet, so I don't want to make any kind of statements, or we don't want to make any statements or anything that would mislead the public about what our role is, because that role has not yet been defined. So just as long as the public knows that, and we're definitely not the Albuquerque DOJ required, police oversight commission. So, any other thoughts or comments on these, on our roles, these, these ordinances ordinance drafts that are out there?
Well, I've got a good deal of skepticism about oversight in general, because historically, police oversight commissions have been quite ineffective at addressing individuals, injured individuals' problems. Things get sent to the police oversight group and they fool with it, even though their hands are tied because they can't really investigate. And then they make a recommendation to the governing body, and the governing body does what it does, and then it goes to arbitration, and it ends up that the injured citizen probably never gets any kind of justice, and it further ends up that a corrective action almost never gets taken. And so I endorse the idea of community liaison. I endorse the idea of supporting the police department with things like the survey. I endorse the idea of us helping make the police more accessible to folks in the community. All those things sound like really good things to me. Trying to perform oversight, to me, I'm more skeptical about that.
Okay. Any thoughts or reactions to that?
My question is, since there's no clarification exactly what our role is, what are we doing? What is our purpose? Why are we meeting?
Well,
If we don't have a role, or we don't know what it is, or it's in flux.
Well, I think that,
Absolutely.
that's a very logical question. And I think because our roles have not been defined yet, and we don't, there is no authority for this body that has been defined. One of the things is that, it's not like this body was created a month ago or 2 months ago or even 6 months ago. Like I said, I've been doing this for 12 years. So there is a track record of, especially this liaison piece between the community and the police, and trying to generate dialogue and a better relationship for the entire community. That part of it has been actually going on for quite a while. And as you know, we are getting some complaints that are being sent here to us, and we can address those complaints. But I think that I see, besides the liaison role, these meetings, this is just my opinion, I'm not speaking for this body, we haven't voted on anything, is that if we do receive complaints, or maybe things that are not complaints but just reports of, I saw an assault, and I'm really concerned about what's happening. I think those things, just as discussion with no hard resolution or action on our part, is still valuable, because it's we are a public body, and these are all being recorded. So that's just my opinion. I don't know what the legality of my opinion. I mean, that's something that our city attorney will have to let us know about. But I think that, for example, we have two complaints that we're going to discuss today. I think even just discussing complaints publicly, I think is very I think it's good for the community. In some cases, can actually be almost healing. Okay? I mean, I think people deserve to be heard, and if if they're not being heard anywhere else, and it's related to law enforcement, it seems like this would be a logical place to hear those. Now, since we're not taking any action on these complaints, we're not reviewing anything, we have no legal powers, we're not making recommendations to the governing body, I think that just the discussion aspect has value. Now, the city attorney might disagree with me and say, no, you guys can't do anything until we define something, but I think the city council is well aware that we've been meeting for years without this clear direction, and I think that over those years, we've still had a positive impact. So even if we're kind of theoretically quasi-unofficial at the moment, I think, you know, it's possible to still do some good in the community. So I don't know, I mean, what do the rest of you think of mine?
Well, I think at this point, we have received, we could frame them as public input. I would say they're also complaints based
Right.
on content.
Yes.
And I would strongly recommend that based on the little we do know about what we're supposed to be doing in the city charter, we're not in a position to advise them yet, but they should receive the city council those two documents.
Yes.
They should be apprised.
Yeah.
Going forward, public input is tricky if the body is receiving complaints that may contain misstatements of fact that are damaging to someone's reputation, for example, or internal matters that could be damaging to police policy and procedure. There's a lot of things that we have to think about in connection with allowing any sort of public input, but at the same time, we have to be mindful that any restriction we impose on public input has to be somewhat content neutral. In other words, we can't say, you're bashing the
Yes.
police department, or we're just not going to read that into the record.
Yeah.
Because we
Yeah.
run into First Amendment issues there.
Well, I think that there are ways to deal with complaints, especially right now, since we are not actually empowered to take any action on the complaints, to simply look at some of the points raised and not necessarily read them out loud verbatim, and just to avoid that sort of thing you just mentioned, where it might be damaging to someone, some specific individual or whatever. But I think that, again, I think there might be ways to deal with this. Obviously, if people had shown up today and they had a public comment, we wouldn't stop them for the 3 minutes that they were talking, correct? So it's not like we can say, wait a minute, you just mentioned this individual, you need to be quiet now. We would just let them talk for 3 minutes, it would be a part of the record, it would be recorded, and no action would be taken, but it's a venue for them to voice their concerns. So, I mean, you know, with these two specific complaints, I think that there are ways that we can discuss the core issues that were raised, and just talk about those core issues without, you know, getting into specific, you know, individual detail. So, you know, unless anyone has an actual objection to that, I think we should at least bring up these two letters that we did receive.
So are we switching now from our authority to public input?
Yes, I think so, because we can't, you know, until we actually get those two documents officially and review them and mark them up with actual written suggestions or feedback, we can't actually take any action on that either. So, and that's what we need to actually give back to the governing body so that they can look at our thoughts and our comments and take that into consideration.
I understand that. I'm asking if we're going to public input now. That would be the-
Yes, yes. I'll have the
Those
agenda.
are- That the chairman is mentioning that we received 2 complaints. I also received them from the chairman, and did you receive them, Mr. Reiner, from me?
I received them from you, yes.
And also Dr. Whiteman received them.
I got at least one of them.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, Chief, have you received those 2 complaints? Because both of the complaints that we received said that they were addressed to the mayor, the city councilor, and to the chief of police, I believe, certainly one of them. But I wanted to make sure that you had those,
Yes, I do.
okay?
Okay, so.
I'm not so sure how much, I think that the people who wrote both of those complaints or took the time to put their concerns in writing and convey them to this commission need to know that their documents were received and that at one way or another, they're going to be heard or discussed, and that we've all read them.
Yes.
As opposed to the common complaint, not necessarily from just this police department, is that complaints go nowhere.
Right.
We've
yeah.
received the complaints. It says it was sent to the city council. We don't know that. So my suggestion is, Mr. Chairman, is that you officially send them to the city council.
And the mayor. 'cause
And
they
the mayor,
referenced it.
and to the chief. So we have this record of where it went.
Yes, that's actually a good suggestion, just to make sure that everybody referenced in the letters actually saw them. and
Well,
got them.
because we had this example earlier about that we were gonna get the drafts and nobody got it. So we'll just make sure that everybody
Yeah,
knows.
very good. Yes, that's a great suggestion, and I definitely can do that. So in terms of core issues that were raised, I think there was one letter from an individual who had questions. It was mainly addressed to the mayor about transparency in terms of appointing the police chief. And I think that, I mean, that's a legitimate question. I think that if you kind of dissect that a little bit, it's really kind of a question to the mayor about what are the criteria for appointing a police chief, and you know, is that criteria being followed? And you know, I mean, I don't know the answer to that question personally, but
I have a point of order.
Yes.
Based on our notice that's on the city website for this meeting, it states that public comment or public input will be read into the record. And there's no restrictions on that statement. So I think we're,
Okay,
at
so
this point,
what you're saying is we
duty
need to
bound.
read the whole letter, just not.
I think we need to read the letter into the record because we've made that commitment. At this
Okay,
point, if we
okay.
want to revisit that, I'm fine with it. That might be.
And you're saying that
future
that's what it
meeting.
says on our posting on the city website?
On the city website, yeah.
Okay, do we have copies of that?
Is that considered, the written complaint, is that considered input at the city meeting? I'm not sure.
Well, if we read it out loud, it would definitely be full-on input into this meeting. So, as opposed to discussing the issues.
I got a copy of it right here.
Okay.
So I guess that was one of the questions I was going to ask. Are we going to read it all through, since we all have the letters, correct? Being that, I guess, we're kind of still in the early stages and we're not really sure where we stand on it. Are we going to read them both all on public record, or are we going to kind of dissect
Well,
certain issues?
again, this is just my opinion, you know, in terms of being entered into the public record, and if the mayor, the city council, the chief, this entire body, every individual in this body has a copy of it, and we're discussing the issues on live video, does that constitute entered into the public record? We're not ignoring the complaints or the issues.
Commissioner Whiteman, what have we committed to do? You're looking at the actual document.
Didn't we say that they would be read into the record? That written public complaints would be read into the record?
Well,
Did we say
I think
that?
we may have, but I thought you were looking at the document on the website itself.
I'm looking at it on my computer here, yeah.
It's not on the
But what's- he's
website.
asking
No,
if it's on the
It's not
website.
on the website, it's on my email from Mary Helen.
That I sent.
Oh, okay.
So it's not officially on the website.
It is on the website.
Is it on the website?
It's on the bleeding website, I'm here to tell you.
You mean the letters are on the website, or the statement?
No, what is on the website, along with our agenda, is a statement instructing people on how to give public input, and that their public input will be read into the record.
Okay, well,
Should we read away?
let's read them
Give you a bunch
then.
of time, but yes.
Okay, let's read them, and then we'll talk about the pertinent issues raised. Do you want to?
Okay, so we have excuse me, so if we're gonna read these into the record, so that's why I was asking at the beginning of this meeting about how did things get on the agenda, because, so you read it in, and then does the public have an opportunity to discuss this further? Are we gonna put it on the next agenda?
Well, again, I think whenever I attend city council meetings, there's a section for public input. Anybody can stand up and say anything they want for 3 minutes. Anything.
It used to be that way.
Has that changed? I haven't been to an actual physical meeting.
Actually, grossly, it's changed. Now you can only address agenda items on that meeting. So if your communication to the city council veers from that.
Interesting. Okay, because we also had OMA training from the DA's office that our agendas need to be posted 10 days after, following the previous meeting, right?
Minutes
Which,
need to be posted. Okay.
and the agenda.
Well, agendas need to be posted beforehand.
Right, so what I'm saying is that, which goes to your question, if someone wants to file a complaint or send a letter of complaint and get it on the agenda, how do they do that?
Well, it doesn't, complaints aren't, a citizen giving public input to a board is not an action item.
That's what I just said, and you said that that's changed because now you publicly make a statement unless it's already on the city.
No, what I'm
agenda.
saying is the city council's policy for public input restricts public input to items that are on the current agenda. Obviously, if somebody has something to say, you can't put whatever they're gonna say on the agenda because you don't know what they're gonna say.
Right.
That's the nature of public input.
Exactly,
So, no. I was just speaking to the restriction of public input at city council, and we're free to establish our rules for public input, and I will defer to our attorney on the commission here, but you don't have to give anybody public input. You could say we just don't accept public input. You could say you have 15 minutes, you have 5 minutes. What you can't do is establish rules that are content specific. You can't say, Bob, what you said embarrasses me and therefore you need to shut up.
right.
That runs athwart of the First Amendment. Policies with regard to public speech need to be content neutral. But,
Can't it just-
well, I might just fool that. I mean, that's a possibility. I'm not in.
Here's
It's
what I
not
suggest.
clear to me that these written documents are input in the same manner as if you showed up at a meeting and had your 3 minutes. It's not clear to me. I agree that these are concerns that we have received, and possibly the mayor and the city council have also received. I'm just not sure about the reading the input into the record. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no.
Yeah,
I'm
because there's
saying
no
I'm not
definition of
sure.
what enter into the record
If
means.
you can give me a few moments, I will ask one of our city staff to actually print out what's on the website in connection with this meeting and public input.
Okay.
So
Why don't
we
we
can
take a
have-
recess so you can do
Okay,
that?
yeah, go ahead. That's
So
what sounds
I
good.
have, I think you're talking about the agenda?
No,
You know, the statement on the city website about public
We're going to take a
input.
recess for a minute.
Sure, we can take a recess.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chief, are you online? Are you on the meetings and minutes page for the city? Okay.
I could use a cookie.
If we go over, let's see, police
We
advisory.
need a little basket.
See the
chocolate
notice of
chip
meeting that's
cookies.
right
Good.
on.
This one?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Gluten-free.
We
Healthy
discussed the
stuff.
bulletproof vest,
Oh, wait,
commander.
notice of virtual, name of board commissioner, advisory commission. No, this is not what, you go back there?
There's public input.
Okay. So it says the Police Advisory Commission will take general public input in written form via email, fax, or hand delivery through 2 p.m. on the day of the scheduled meeting. With,
Let's see,
I'll let you do that because my eyesight is garbage and
web
closer to the
submission,
screen.
web submission for the public input shall be submitted to Raylene D. Lopez, Administrative Assistant, Las Vegas Police Department. Hard copies can be faxed, and it gives the fax number, or delivered to the police department. Public input submitted will be read into record during the meeting.
That's the answer.
Thank you,
It
Chief.
doesn't say entered into record, it says read into record.
I think it's the same thing.
Well, entered into record could be that this could be filed and posted on the site with the agenda. Let's see this later. All right, so let's read these and then discuss the pertinent issues. I don't have a copy of them, so.
Complaint number 1.
Yes, this is complaint number 1. It looks like actually this is sent to the city clerk as well. I'm just going to read this verbatim. And my reading of it is not either an endorsement or a non-endorsement. It's just, I'm just reading it. Mayor, Council, and Chief Antonio Salazar. I'm writing to you because I am very disturbed by the recent, I should have brought my other glasses, the recent Police Advisory Board meeting that was held on August 19th pertaining to the introduction of Chief Antonio Salazar and his lack of empathy and understanding of violent crimes against women and domestic violence. I'm a survivor of domestic violence and would not believe that Mr. Salazar's understanding of violent crimes against women and domestic violence are narrowed down as women of domestic violence are being backdated to the caveman years to include that women are uneducated, unemployed, and only dependent on a male perpetrator who is a woman's security blanket that brings home the meat and potatoes. Mr. Salazar, the year is 2021. Let me give you a proper update. Women who have experienced domestic violence are highly educated professionals, full-time employees, amazing mothers and providers for their families, can maintain more than one job and gain their college education, and also women who have experienced domestic violence are not only in male-female relationships, but can also be in female-female relationships. As I continued to listen in pure disbelief, Mr. Salazar continued with his machismo speech to say that women should already have an avenue in place before calling the police for assistance, as it should never get to that point. Do you really believe that women will know the exact time and date when they will become victims of domestic violence that could possibly end in death? And are you telling me, as a victim of domestic violence, that as I was getting physically kicked and punched by my ex-husband, who was also contemplating throwing a hot pan of oil on me, and let us not forget to mention in front of my 3 children, that I should be trying to reach out to my avenue instead of trying to call 911. I would have thought that your duty, especially being the chief of police, is to serve and protect the members of our community, but as you continued speaking during the meeting, you went on to state that when the police are addressing domestic violence crimes, women portray the police as the bad guys who are breaking up a family because that is all they know, and at the end of the day still see this male individual as their provider. Are you serious? Do you have any clue how offensive and disgusting this is? I hope this is not what you're advising our police officers to believe. I was relieved when Mrs. Wickert changed the subject to offer you some guidance and put an end to your verbal torment. I did my own research on violent crimes against women to include those mentioned during the meeting. Shauna's story, decomposing body, alleged destruction of evidence, sexual penetration of a 14-year-old girl. Male perpetrator shot and killed his girlfriend and himself, and what I come to find out is that you, Mr. Salazar, are the lead investigator on these crimes. Have you provided the public with any updates on these crimes? When was the last time you were in contact with these families? Do you know or care how these family members are coping after learning about such horrific details with their loved ones? I would think not. Obviously, Mr. Salazar, you lack the proper education and training for violent crimes against women and domestic violence. You showed not 1 ounce of compassion toward the victims and their families during this meeting. You based your limited law enforcement credentials that you provided during your introduction, other than your hundreds of hours of trainings for defensive tactics, show that you are a bad example for our fight against violent crimes against women and domestic violence. I would like you to know that I'm forwarding this letter to the proper agencies and ask that they never ask or consider you, Mr. Salazar, as a representative or speaker for violent crimes against women and domestic violence, and that they will all watch the Police Advisory Committee meeting dated 8/19/21, 3 p.m., which is available on YouTube. Still in disbelief, she signs off as Elise, survivor of domestic violence. Okay, so that's one complaint. And again, just for the public record, this is received in writing. One of the this is the second letter of complaint. This one is anonymous. One of the biggest and most admirable traits of a leader is stability. Stable leaders provide a stabilizing influence on others. These types of individuals you can trust and you can build around. Stable leaders model a level of constancy and consistency that individuals, teams, and organizations so desperately need but often find missing. Erratic, ill-tempered, or inconsistent leaders create unnecessary levels of operational tension, anxiety, and discord. The lack of stability in the Las Vegas Police Department has harmed the culture. It has stifled productivity, it has eroded trust, and has made it extremely difficult to retain top talent. In speaking to members of the police force, there has been a fear of being punished for failure under the new administration of the department. If the people there are afraid to make mistakes, you'll never see their best work. The leaders of the upper echelon of the department must make it safe for people to think big, take risks, and try new and different things. Nothing creates stability more than a high-trust environment where people are rewarded for the right behaviors, not punished for them. Under the term of the mayor for the city of Las Vegas, there have been 3 chiefs in less than 2 years. This does not provide a sense of stability for the department for us citizens. It seems the mayor has a huge sense of insecurity about his image and his chosen leadership if a failure occurs. This brings into question, is this newly appointed chief of police the right person for the job, or was he chosen purely out of popularity with the mayor? The citizens and employees of the Las Vegas Police Department do not need a chief who is popular to the mayor and who will carry out the agenda of the mayor for pure political reasons. The people need an individual who is willing to stick up for the employees and make decisions which will impact crime and community involvement. The chief must create a better quality of life for its citizens so our community can prosper and feel safe. And speaking with members of the Las Vegas Police Department, there is a huge concern of what is going to happen. They do not know if they can trust the decisions of the chief and his new command staff. Many have said there's a huge lack of qualifications and experience from these individuals. Many have said they feel the department took a huge step back in progress with the appointments of the chief and his command staff. Many said they like these individuals, but know they are not ready. They are not ready the positions they were chosen for. In my research, I found no history of documentation as to a process which was done for the chief of police. We do not know if the newly appointed chief, Antonio Salazar, has the experience and knowledge to be a manager and leader of the police department. I know the mayor has the authority to appoint individuals of his choosing to the chief's position. I do not feel the choosing of the chief of police was transparent, as many of our government officials preach about transparency. Why is it that only certain things in our city government are made transparent to us? We deserve the right to know who our chief is and who their command staff is, and that they meet the experience and qualifications needed to carry out the duties of these positions. If these individuals are there based on popularity, this is a huge disservice to our community and the employees for the police department. These individuals must have years of experience in supervision and management. Mayor Trujillo, stop hurting our citizens by playing a popularity contest and choose competent people who have the experience to carry out the duties so desperately needed in the city of Las Vegas. Sincerely, a frustrated citizen. Okay, so that's the second complaint letter.
If I may make a recommendation,
Yes.
I think the first thing we should do is afford our chief the opportunity to respond. All of this is not against the chief, and certainly the second letter
Yeah, it's really more about the
is
mayor.
critical of the mayor as well, but I think the chief definitely deserves the opportunity to address these things.
Yes.
Yes, so, so as far as the survivor of the domestic violence, I guess we can talk about that one first. So first, I think it's, we should give respect to the male relationships as well. But with that being said, I don't think this letter was a misrepresentation of what I explained for the domestic violence, because they're explaining that they should look for an avenue before the domestic violence occurs. I think if we all can kind of think back on that conversation, it was just we should develop avenues for victims of domestic violence. Obviously not during a domestic violence situation, but have avenues after a domestic violence situation, for the victim to either to get housing, to either get money, and money for apartments, and I'm speaking on this from personal experience. In Clovis, there's tons and tons of different avenues. I mean, there's actually shelters there in Clovis where I used to work. They don't even tell the police officers that victims are there. I mean, it's very difficult for us to get confirmation to find out if they're there. So we kind of have to jump through a lot of hoops to figure out if the victims are there, and that's set in place for the safeguarding of the victims. And as far as I know, they had mentioned the breadwinner or something of that nature. I'm speaking on this again from experience, because there are not that many avenues. We do have Tri-County, and they do an excellent job on helping victims of domestic violence. And I think I was just trying to carry on a conversation about how we should place more resources available for the victims. And whenever they said that, I can't think of it, but I'm trying to think, where was that? Oh, so the breadwinner. From experience, and you could talk to probably any officer around the state, any officer around any other state, it is very difficult for a victim of domestic violence to reach out to, let's say, an officer, just because that takes away their source of income most of the time. And I'm not saying that victims of domestic violence, whether it be male or female, can't obtain a job and hold a job and take care of a family while still being battered by their abuser. I'm not saying that at all, and I didn't say that either. So it was just, we just need to develop, again, different. So whenever a female, or whenever anyone feels like they're a victim of domestic violence, it is very hard for them to reach out. So that's why in most cases they go back to their abuser, and it is because their source of income sometimes, or most of the time, that is a security blanket. Granted, they are not in a very safe place, but it's hard for them to reach out, and I think we need to make it, try to make it easier for them to reach out, and more, not just for police officers, because we're finding a lot of times where they don't want to reach out to police officers. So they need to have, we should, as a city, have something in place that they can reach out. Maybe it be someone from Tri-County, which I'm sure we do have, an avenue for them to Tri-County, and they are doing an excellent job. But just as how much domestic violence has impacted me, in not only in law enforcement, but in my personal life, it is a big issue for me, and I would like for there to be more resources for victims of domestic violence to reach out and being able to get out of that situation. Ultimately, that's what we want. We want them to get out of that situation. And yeah, and from a law enforcement standpoint, we charge the individual who is the abuser in that relationship. So, and then as far as that, I have cases of domestic violence, and they had mentioned here, Shauna's story, decomposing body. That's probably more public than any other of these cases, but the alleged destruction of evidence and the sexual penetration, and there's this next one, the shot and killed his girlfriend, homicide / suicide. These cases aren't out to the public, really. I'm guessing, so I can only speak on the one that, on the 14-year-old girl. That case, he has been charged. I did charge him. He is going to court. We have court hearings coming up, and have continued to come up. And as far as some of these other ones, the alleged destruction of evidence, so without giving too much information, there is a case that had come up with the homicide / suicide. There was evidence that had come up during my investigation, and I did present it to my command staff at the time, who was the commander of investigations, and he actually shot me down and would not allow me to further my investigation on the possible, I don't want to say charges, but the possible investigation of the newly uncovered evidence pertaining to that case. And again, that information wouldn't have been put out to the public. That information was only shared through 5, maybe 6 investigators, including the commander at the time. So that's kind of alarming, and that this person had got a hold of that information. Let's see, and like I said, I don't think this letter is being taken out of context at all. I think it was just a rearrangement of words to make it fit, and I guess that's what I'm just so concerned about this, because you know, I do have a passion, I am very passionate about domestic violence because I have experienced domestic violence in my personal life, and I've been in law enforcement for years, and I've experienced countless of domestic violence cases. And then for things like this to get out, just pertaining to my cases, again, only a select few in the police department would have known, and I was unable to pursue that investigation further because that was put to a halt by the commander at the time. So, I stand for any questions or any concerns regarding my rebuttal.
You know, I think that I do recall, and I haven't reviewed the video, but I do recall in the last meeting we did talk quite a bit about Tri-County. We talked about, I actually asked the question, are there women's, like anonymous women's shelters here? And if there's not, there needs to be. So that's something we could potentially, our body might be able to, you know, advocate for with the, you know, the county or whomever. And we also talked about the drug, you know, referral program, this new facility that's being put together. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I'm sorry to interrupt, I didn't intend to.
That's okay.
That would be a good example of the things that we can be advising the governing body of.
I
You don't
agree. I
have a
agree.
safe house for victims of domestic violence, and you desperately need one.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree.
That may not be in the BLVPD's ballpark, but it's in the municipalities.
Yeah, and it's something that, you know, the PD could refer, you know, a victim of domestic violence to, or just, it could be just publicized so that people would know about it. So I think that, you know, yeah, your statement about reaching out to other avenues, you know, I think you were actually referring to services, as I recall. I mean, she does bring up some good points here, one of which is not all victims of domestic violence are, you know, people who are dependent on their significant others. They could be professional women, working women. I mean, that happens fairly a lot. So that's actually an important point. But I think that the, you know, part of the, you know, and again, this is my recollection, but part of the points that were discussed is that a lot of, especially women, because you're right, I mean, some men are also victims of domestic violence, but especially women are a little bit hesitant to report due to the possibility of retaliation, you know, and I think that that's also very common, which is why an anonymous, you know, shelter, you know, to get people away from this kind of thing is really critical. Now, as far as the retaliation part, I know that in this state, and this is not something that we can solve by ourselves, or that even our city attorney or our governing body can solve, but I know that there are restrictions on who a woman can file a restraining order against, right? I mean, it's not like some states, it's pretty wide open. I think, unless it's changed recently, I think in this state, it has to be a relationship. It has to be a husband, you know, a family member. It can't just be some guy, right? A boyfriend, you know. So, and that's a problem, because I know that the flip side to that is, you know, filing a restraining order against an abuser often does result in retaliation. I mean, the abuser doesn't, I mean, if they're not obeying the law anyway, they're not going to obey a you know, restraining order. So, and that's a legitimate concern, which she sort of hints at here. But so I think that, you know, there are things that she did bring up that we might want to think about further, because I know you brought up a number of, you know, you brought up these domestic violence issues, as did Kimberly when we were working through the survey. She brought up a lot of them, which was fantastic. So I think this body itself, yeah, I mean, you're right, we could advocate for certain things, you know, and make recommendations that we think these things are important in the community. I think, you know, this effort with the county, you know, and the city and other entities to create this diversion program for, you know, drug addicts will be helpful, because sometimes these things go together, right? So, but I think that, you know, we can Obviously, this has been read into the record, it has been received. We are fully aware of it, and I think that there may be good things that come out of this. As far as the questions that you brought up regarding specific cases that she mentioned that are not necessarily public knowledge, I mean, that comes back to what are we required to read out loud in a public meeting? You know what I'm saying? If we're revealing details of a case that could jeopardize the case, that could be problematic. So that's something I think we should bring up with the city attorney, because we are a police commission. It's not like we're just some general board, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes that might happen. And if it's problematic, and for example, one of us is reading a letter like this, some of those things we might want to redact before it's read. It doesn't, take away from the letter being read in public and entered into the record. The physical version is still in the record. The city council has it, the mayor has it, we have it. So, but that is a question I think we should bring up. If somebody writes a letter like this and they're actually revealing information pertaining to a case that might affect the actual outcome of the case, do we have the permission of the city just to redact little bits of, a sentence here or there?
I'd like to make a suggestion.
Yes.
And that is, it's possible to draw a distinction between public input, which is general matters of happiness or discontent, versus an actual complaint involving a specific individual and a specific incident. And I think we should make clear to the public that the latter is a complaint, and the latter may not be publicly discussed if there are cogent reasons to not publicly discuss it. As you're pointing out, if discussing it means we're talking about a case that is in progress and you would maybe, I don't know, just divulge the identity of an informant or. There are a number of things to consider, and I think it might be prudent of us to disambiguate, to define those two things and manage them via separate process.
I think that's a fantastic suggestion, because if it's an actual complaint against, say, individual officers, there's a whole process for that. There's a complaint form, there's a way to do that and to be heard. But yeah, again, that's something that we should let the public know that there is an opportunity here for public comment. There's also a very formal process for filing an actual complaint against a police officer or multiple officers that might lead to an internal investigation scenario. And then there's also just a general, what I was talking about earlier, where somebody might have witnessed a crime, but they're afraid to report it because they don't want to get involved, or they don't, that's a whole different thing. That's just a crime report. Or even if it's just suspicious activity. So, yeah, no, you're right, Lee. There's actually three different things that are handled differently, and there's a place for all three. I think one of the things this body will need is more access to the city attorney, where we can actually say, in this particular complaint, whatever it is this, if this is information that might be pertinent to a live case, should this go in the direction of an actual complaint, not public input, or should we just redact these parts? I mean, I don't think we're not like lawyers acting on behalf of the city, so I think that's something that could be worked out between us, the police department, and the city attorney. But, thank you for bringing that up. That is very important. And since the public is watching, just do keep in mind that if you have an actual complaint about a police officer, that should go through the complaint process. There's a form for that. There's a process for it. It gets reviewed by, the folks in charge of IA. And that itself is a whole process that might result in all the way up to a firing, so, or criminal charges. So, good, very good point. Thank you for mentioning that.
I'd like to comment a little bit. I think both of these letters were fairly carefully written, and they included some very strong feelings and some disturbing allegations. And the writers, like I say, went to a lot of trouble to let us know about these concerns. And I think we need to thank the people who wrote us, who communicated with us. I think something like this is not easy to receive on the one hand. On the other hand, I think it's way valuable. We need to know what people are feeling and thinking. And I think for every letter we get, there's 10 more folks who feel the same way, who didn't bother to put all this stuff down in paper and put themselves out there. So I'd like to thank the writers of the letters, and I'd like to not be too particular about whether they go here or there. If somebody sends us a letter that should have gone to the police complaint department, we can forward it over to the police complaint department, no problem. We don't need to be too picky. I think we should encourage people to communicate with us however and whenever they want to.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I've written numerous complaint letters. I mean, not about the department, just in general in my life.
We're not the
Yeah,
only
it takes
avenue. People
takes
can
time.
write a letter to the editor and get it published. I mean, you know,
Maybe.
you know, there are other ways to deal with this.
Yeah, no, it takes
But-
effort, it takes time.
But we should celebrate and appreciate somebody who communicated us something that's difficult to hear sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I think that this is the core concept and kind of the heart and soul of community oversight. We're not public elected officials. We're not career politicians. We're not actually even PD. We're a collection of citizens of the city of Las Vegas who represent the other residents of the city of Las Vegas, in a sense, and we have to be as accessible as possible. That's, if we're not, then this body doesn't function as designed.
Even though we're not 100% sure how it's designed.
Even though it hasn't been designed yet, I'm looking forward to the future with positive attitude.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you both just said. So, Chief, the second letter, would you like to address this one as well? Yes,
Excuse
I'm
me.
sorry, Mary.
I have a comment on the domestic violence survivor. I think that it's, I agree with Dr. Whiteman that it's good to receive letters, even if you don't agree with everything that was said in it or have a different perspective on it. Domestic violence is a huge recurring problem, and it needs to be brought up. It needs to be addressed constantly. It's complicated, it's heartbreaking, too often it's deadly, not only for the people who are involved, but the other family members and even police officers who have to respond. So it needs to be brought up and not filed away in some little, oh, it's just domestic, as if like somehow it's not as bad as other cases. It is. And so for the person who wrote that, thank you for writing your letter. Thank you for allowing us to have the opportunity to read it, to forward it, and to discuss it at least at some level.
Yeah, thank you.
May I pose a question, Chief?
Yes.
When somebody comes in to report that they're the victim of domestic violence, or for that matter, sexual assault, who do they talk to? Is it just like whatever officer is on duty? Or is there somebody with a more concentrated and specialized skill set that may be able to talk to?
So it would be, the way that goes, it would be an officer, and I mean, each officer, they get training from Tri-County, so each officer has significant training in dealing with domestic violence. And if there's anything that furthers more investigation, then an investigator might step in, like you said, a sexual assault victim. An investigator would step in and either take the case over or work alongside with the officer on getting more details about the case, possibly, obviously getting a suspect for the case. Again, we've done every effort to try to help that victim and reach out to Tri-County to see if there's anything that they could do for them as well. So it's not just about trying to seeing what evidence we can gather to strengthen the case. It's not just about that. It's about actually trying to help the victims of domestic violence and trying to, ultimately trying to keep them safe. If they don't want to go back to the home and they have another place to go, the officers will offer the transportation to do that. If they need certain things from the house, if they need small toiletry or clothes to go to work tomorrow, we as officers will do that. We'll do a civil standby. We'll go through. Obviously, we're not taking we're not getting couches and stuff like that, but just stuff that a very concerned victim of domestic violence would take, just extra clothes, stuff like that. And we do offer that. We police officers will take that time to go and do a standby and make sure that they end up in a safe place. Again, we should, as a city, have something in place for them, but officers, the officers know that we don't necessarily have, I guess that avenue or that funding for money for apartments for the victims. So officers will take it upon themselves to find a safe place for them.
Thank you.
I have one quick question and a comment. The comment is that I think that it's a known fact that police responding to domestic violence calls is the most dangerous kind of call that you can respond to, because they're often out of control and people are kind of, in a really severely emotional state at that moment. The other question I had is that, we've talked about Tri-State, but for the benefit of the public audience, can you just talk about Tri-State a little bit? What are they doing?
So they have a victims advocate where they can reach out to, they offer counseling, they offer different things for the victims of domestic violence. They help. So if a victim of domestic violence doesn't know how to fill out the paperwork or what avenue to take, and they can. So let's say they don't want to come to the police. Like I was telling you earlier, a lot of victims, they don't want to go to the police. So that's an avenue for them where they can help them fill out paperwork and give them advice and really, ultimately they kind of do what we do. They try to find a safe place for them, and if they need us to get involved, then obviously we'll be there to help them or handle a case if need be.
Okay, yeah, and I think that, I've had some experience with domestic violence as well, and I know many women have been raped, many. And I've done what I can to help people, get them out of their house, away from their abuser, help them put together what they need to, go after serial rapists and so on. So yeah, it's a huge, and it's an ongoing problem. But I think that, the more services like Tri-County, I think a physical shelter structure that's anonymous would be extremely helpful. At some point we can continue this discussion and actually kind of make a list of things that we know, especially from other towns, other municipalities, could be helpful. And I agree with Lee, we should advocate for those things. And I think that would be a good role for this, for this body. So.
And sorry if I can
okay.
say, as far as the domestic violence that this individual has faced, I just want to make sure that I'm not I don't want to be misconstrued as being insensitive in my response to this. I think the only thing that I guess I'm looking at the whole letter as a whole, and yes, like I was telling you, I've experienced or in my personal life, I've experienced domestic violence, and I've handled countless domestic violence cases. But, looking at the whole letter, some of the stuff that has been talked about in this letter as far as evidence and things like that, just, I guess, so you guys can, and everyone can understand where I'm coming from. This has been like an ongoing pattern of what has been going on. A lot of stuff has been kind of leaked from the department a little bit, and there are some concerns that, people within the department who are, kind of upset about certain things, are possibly, leaking out information that shouldn't have been leaked out. But again, as far as the domestic violence issues, it's completely zero tolerance, anything that we can do to help. But, looking at the body and the whole of this letter is just, I guess that's what's concerning, is this person was able to get a hold of some of my investigations, and that some of those two particular investigations weren't put out to the public. They're not for public record, and for them to be very specific on alleged destruction of evidence regarding the homicide/suicide. Again, there was only 5 individuals that had knowledge of that. One including the commander, who had said, we're not going to pursue that. So I guess that's what's concerning. But as far as domestic violence, I don't want it to seem, the police department does not, we have zero tolerance for domestic violence, and we will do anything and everything to try to keep the victims of domestic violence safe, and we ourselves will look for different avenues to help them stay safe. And we encourage anybody who has been involved or is currently being involved in domestic violence to come and speak with us. And I'm even going out and saying, if they don't want to speak with us, at least speak with someone speak with enough people to where it can eventually get to us so we can help. Or, like I said, Tri-County can help. I think that needs to be put out there more. If they just speak with someone and talk about even just a neighbor or a friend, eventually it'll get back to us. Eventually we can step in and put a stop to it. So ultimately that's what our goal is to put a stop to, domestic violence.
Yeah, and in fact, they can speak with us.
Yeah.
This commission is.
By Tri-County, you mean the Tri-County Justice Center out at DeVille Park?
Right up here behind Walmart. They have the business complex. They have CYFD there, Tri-County, the DMV.
Oh.
Out there, they help with the training orders. They help with filling out any paperwork.
Is that the same folks who were out there at DeVille before? Is that the
Yes.
group?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So that's a very good resource.
So we ought to publicize that,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think if it were publicized more, if their services were publicized more, it could be helpful. Did you want to address this other?
The second one. This is a lengthy one, huh? So I know they had made some statements about retaining talent, and I'm just going based off of I guess retaining officers. We have 6 new officers in the application process. We have hopefully 2 certified officers coming to work with us. We're getting new vehicles. So not to And, you know, I guess we're moving forward from what, you know, what the past was, and I think we're doing a lot more, and you can probably talk to any officer at the police department. The morale has never been higher. We're actually taking into consideration officers now. You know, it's not so much ourselves, it's more for the officers, and we are retaining, not only retaining, we are getting, this is probably one of the most we've ever hired in years as far as police officers. And as far as records, you know, some of our civilian staff, we got them raises within less than a month that this new command staff has been in place, but yet we were being told that, you know, conversations upon conversations were being had to try to get them raises, and all it took was for us to come and sit down with, you know, with the right people, and we got them raises. And I don't know if they ever had those conversations, but I mean, obviously it only took one conversation for us to have, and we were able to get them up to par with their, you know, with their pay. And let's see. It's also, you know, like the motto back then, like you kind of had to show us something before we give you something, and that's not the case anymore. I mean, we're treating our officers like adults. We're treating, I mean, we trust them with the gun and the badge and the authority to take freedoms away. So, I mean, to treat them like little kids, and I mean, that doesn't seem feasible. So, you know, in our development of our street crimes unit, that's kind of, they're able to work kind of freely now. I mean, they've built numerous of cases in just a little of time that, you know, this command staff has been in place. And I can speak from experience, we've asked for that. We've asked for schedule changes and a little bit more freedom to help out patrol and to help out, you know, to actually put a damper on the crime here in Las Vegas. And, you know, again, you know, by the command staff at the time, that was kind of stopped. It was, first you got to show me, you know, for me to give you something. So, but we gave them the opportunity. You know, we didn't have that attitude. We gave them the opportunity, and now, I mean, they're producing cases and they're helping out patrol. And like I said, the morale is, I think, at an all-time high. And anybody can go up to any police officer now and ask them any questions, and I'm sure they'll have nothing but positive things to say. And I know it's I'm speaking from the chief's standpoint. I want to kind of make everything look good. I know that's what everybody thinks, but I encourage anybody from the community to reach out to our police officers and sit down and have a conversation with them, and that way they can know, you know, they'll know, and hopefully once we can have actual public input, you know, we can start addressing the public in person, and I think those face-to-face conversations will be, well, they just go a lot better, you know. I mean, we can read emotions, we can kind of see where people are coming from. Maybe that's not what I meant, this is what I meant. So things like that. So I hope in due time that we can have, you know, public in here and have conversations.
Yeah, I think, you know, I should probably mention, you know, I think we all know this, but one of the, I mean, it's good to hear, you know, what you just said. I think that one of the challenges that we have as a small department is that we pay a lot less than state police and Santa Fe police and Albuquerque police, so we tend to train officers well here, and then they get, you know, offered something at a higher rate somewhere else and they leave. So that's kind of a built-in challenge. So I think, you know, having good working conditions, being recognized, you know, being treated well, those things all help mitigate that kind of situation. I mean, money's money, but that's not the only thing, you know. Especially if an officer is from here, then they have connections to the community and family and all that. so it might be a little less likely, but that is a continuing challenge. And I know that we're a small city, we can't just afford to suddenly pay really high rates for officers, but again, just as an advocate, for community policing, in this town, I think, again, just speaking for myself, I would say to the governing body that public safety is a really, really high concern. And if we could see it in our budgets to shift some budgets around and make that available for officer pay, I think that would be a wise investment. Of course, everything's a priority, right? We need medical staff, we need good hospital, there's a lot of things we need. People staffing, tri-county, all that stuff, but these are all little things that make a community a community. If people don't feel safe, then they're not going to stick around. So again, these are little things that we, as a body, can advocate for. Whether or not we have any effect, it's still voices heard. And I've never met anybody in this community who would say that we should not do that. I mean, seriously, everybody wants a good police department, and it's in everyone's interest to have good community and police relations. So, other questions?
Well, actually, I have a little bit of input.
Yes.
First of all, not everybody at the PD is a police officer.
Right, that's true.
You have a lot of support staff there who also have needs beyond the paycheck. You need stability in your workplace. I can understand that, and this is, this is not your doing, Chief, but the author of this letter is not mistaken when they say that, there's been an awful lot of turnover in the police chief's position over the past several years, and that it makes people feel like that it's shifting sands, and they don't necessarily know what they're walking into from day to day potentially. And so I guess my first question to you would be, is the position of police chief politicized? I know we had the same kind of turnover with our city attorney, and it's probably the most political position of the city. And I don't know that there's correlation there, but it seems reasonable to ask.
I mean, there are requirements. You're a police officer, and you have to have experience as a police officer. You have to be certified as a police officer. Whether it's like, I guess, a political position, or I guess a political selection, I mean, it does come forward, does come in front of the counseling body, and it is voted on. I guess, I mean, it would be a type of a political role, being that it is an appointed position, for sure. And it's not only appointed by, the mayor, that he presents whoever the selection is, or a selection, or two selections, and the council and body, they are the ones who actually vote, yay or nay, or this one or that one.
What would you attribute the turnover to? I'll just ask it open-ended.
Well, from experience with the past chiefs, so I'm trying to tread, real lightly here. So the experience with the past chiefs, okay, there's been 3, in the last 2 years, I think they said,
Right.
Well, yeah, he did. I can't remember the second one is, and then
He was there for 2 weeks. The
Right.
second one.
Delgado.
Delgado, yes, Delgado and Adrian Crispy. Okay, so it's the start,
If it's gonna put you in a difficult
That's
spot
not
to
a fair
answer in a
question.
candid way.
That's not
It's
a
all
fair
right.
question for him, come
Yeah,
on.
I just,
Well, you
well,
know,
good. So, I'll answer the best way that I can, and hopefully this gives enough information. I guess the focus is on certain things and different expectations. They weren't met. Whatever the expectations that were put forth through, from the council body and the mayor and the city manager, those weren't met in the past two. And as far as the most recent one, there was concerns, along with the expectations that were not met. I think there was not only concerns from the counseling body and the mayor and the city manager, also from the public. And I don't want to speak out of, this is just from my experience, and I don't want to bash anybody on things, but I think just expectations weren't met. Whatever expectations were put forth, they weren't met. And I hope to meet those expectations. So the next chief isn't having to come up here and answer our hard questions.
well, I think too, we had a transition in mayor also, which, additionally kind of complicated, the chiefs,
Yeah.
multiple chief positions. So, yeah, there has been a lot of turnover, but, oh, yeah, we probably should be wrapping up soon. Any other comments about either one of these letters at this point?
Are we going to have additional input in case anybody's still watching after? Don't we have to wait for people to have input?
Well, there's no one here, and I don't know if there's a way for anybody to input.
Yeah.
No,
They're
are
not
we
here.
we're still having a meeting, right?
Yes.
So,
But input, I think, in written form cut off at 2:00.
no, I understand that. I thought maybe because we're on YouTube, there might be some way for somebody to comment still.
There's not.
It's
Yeah.
not, as opposed to Zoom, I get it, it's not the same thing.
No, unless somebody's physically here or unless they submit a letter, that won't be happening. Although we are going to be moving to Google Meet
Yes.
as of next meeting, in which
That's what I
case
meant.
people could join through their computer and make comments, which we have had people do before. So, yeah. So, one last question. Who at Tri-County should we talk to get more information and to talk to them about maybe publicizing their services for, the victims of domestic abuse more?
So if you talk to Ana Rivera, she will kind of help out with, I guess, pointing you in the right direction within the department, so.
Okay, Ana.
And she's in the front.
Okay.
I think she's still there in the front, but Ana Rivera.
Okay, because
she'll help
there
out.
may be ways, as it was pointing out here, that we can help publicize.
Yeah.
Because I think the more people know about what they offer, the better.
Yes.
So, okay, any other business? Okay. Then, do I hear a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? No opposed? Okay, this meeting has been adjourned. Thank you very much. And thank you, Chief,
Thank you.
for all of your comments.
Are you keeping